Hi, in this video, I'm going to introduce the switch forwarding process. We're going to be talking a little bit about the MAC address table, and there'll be more videos on that following this video. So be sure to watch those. Okay, so first of all, switches make their forwarding decision based on layer 2 information. Switches, that's why we call switches a layer 2 device. Okay. To make sense of this, let's take a look down here first at a hub. A hub we call a layer 1 device because it forwards based on layer 1 information, bits. Basically, all a switch does, or I'm sorry, a hub does is bits come in one port and it doesn't care about what those bits are. It just sends them out all other ports except the incoming port. That's all a hub does. It's just a repeater, a multi-port repeater. Just regenerates those bits out other ports. Doesn't care what those bits are. That's all it does. A switch, however, does a little bit more than that. It's what we call a layer 2 device. The reason why is that it makes its forwarding decision based on the layer 2, in this case an Ethernet switch, the layer 2 Ethernet destination MAC address. I'm going to see how it does that in a moment. Okay. Now it also acts like a layer 1 device in that it will regenerate the frames. But what a switch wants to do, an Ethernet switch, is when a Ethernet frame comes in on one port, if it can, it tries to just send it out the one port that it needs to go out to reach its destination. If it has to, if it doesn't know where that device is, it will send it out all other ports. Take a look at that in a moment. Now, this is for a later discussion, but just routers we call layer 3 devices because they make their forwarding decision based on layer 3 information, the IPv4 or IPv6 destination address. But that's for a later discussion. Okay, so how do switches learn and forward? Switches learn by examining the source MAC address and the incoming port number. Okay, we're going to take a look at this in a moment. Is that source MAC address and the incoming port number in its MAC address table? This is a table it keeps in RAM memory, sometimes known as CAM. If it's not in the MAC address table, it will add it. Okay, and it will keep it there for 5 minutes or refresh that timer every time it receives a frame. We'll see how this works in a moment and more later in other videos. If it's already in the MAC address table, it just refreshes the timer. Then it wants to forward the frame, and it does this by examining the destination MAC address. If it's a unicast destination MAC address, it checks to see if the MAC address is in its MAC address table. If it isn't, it will flood it out all ports except the incoming port. In that case, it's acting a lot like a hub, but no collisions. If it is in its MAC address table, it will send it out just that port. Okay, we'll see this in a moment. If it's a broadcast or a multicast, and multicast, unless it's using IGMP, it will flood it out all ports, just like a broadcast. Don't worry about multicast right now. Just assume that it works a lot like a broadcast. All right, let's see an example of what we're talking about. Okay, so a switch has a MAC address table. This is something that keeps in its memory. All right, so let's say we have an Ethernet frame here. Okay, and that Ethernet frame has a source MAC address of 000A. I've shortened these MAC addresses to make it easier, and a destination MAC address of 000D. Okay, that Ethernet frame is sent by A and comes into the switch on port 1. The switch, the first thing it wants to do is learn, right? And it learns by examining the source MAC address. Is this source MAC address in its MAC address table? I don't see it. Okay, so what it's going to do is add the MAC address, in this case, the source MAC address, 000A, and the incoming port number, which was port 1. So it has just learned that on its port 1 is this MAC address. Okay, let's see what happens next. Now what the switch wants to do is forward the frame based on the destination MAC address. So remember, it came in on port 1, and it learned that on port 1 source MAC address is 000A. Now it wants to forward it. It's going to look at the destination MAC address. Is that MAC address in its table? I don't see it. Yeah, I don't see 000D anywhere. So it will act like a hub, except no collisions, and it will forward it out all ports except the incoming port. So all these devices will see it. Later videos will explain this in more detail. Okay? And by the way, in this case here, B will ignore it, C will ignore it, D will accept it because it says it's my NIC card. Oh yeah, I recognize that destination MAC address. That's for me. Okay, so let's keep on going with this scenario here. So now let's have D send an Ethernet frame back to A, because that's usually how communications works. It goes, bi-directional. Okay, so first thing that the Ethernet frame comes into the switch is going to learn. It's going to learn by examining the source MAC address. It says, okay, have I learned anything here? Is that source MAC address in my MAC address table? No, it isn't. So the switch will add the source MAC address, 000D, and the incoming port number, 4, to the MAC address table. That's how it learns, by examining the source MAC address. Okay, let's continue with this. Oh, let me clear out that. There we go. Now it wants to forward the frame. And it's going to do that by examining the destination MAC address. It's okay, let me look at the destination MAC address. 000A, is that in my table? Oh my goodness, there it is. Yeah, because it had learned it previously. So the switch won't have to flood it out all ports. It can send it out just port 1, right? So it just sends it just out port 1 to this device where that device with that MAC address is located. Okay. So you're starting to see how this works, why switches, they learn. Once they learn, then they can filter the frame and go out a specific port instead of all ports. Okay, so what happens now if A sends back to D? Let's take a look. So A has another Ethernet frame to send back to D. So let's take a look at that. That frame with the source MAC address 000A comes into the switch. Now this time the switch says, is there anything I need to learn? It says, no, there's, see, port 1, 000A. Hey, I already know about that. So nothing new to learn, but I will refresh my 5-minute timer. And then let's just go ahead and continue with this. That's the learning, so it doesn't have to add it again. Next thing it's going to do is forward, right? And it's going to forward the frame based on what? You got it, the destination MAC address. Good. Okay. And it's going to look up the destination MAC address in the table. It says, oh, yep, there it is. Now I can send this frame just out port 4. Okay. So once the Ethernet switches learn both source MAC addresses, it can then send those Ethernet frames destined to that MAC address out a specific port instead of flooding it out all ports. So there's some more videos on the MAC address, so please take a look at those, and that will help you understand this learning and forwarding process and how switches build their MAC address tables and how they forward frames a lot better. Hope you enjoyed it.